The world is populated by a diverse array of individuals, and among them there are entities that remain hidden. From ordinary people, however, there are certain individuals who possess the ability to perceive and interact with ghosts and spiritual beings. These gifted individuals perform rituals that bring contentment to the divine. In the practice of exorcism, they summon and channel ghosts, utilizing their power to restore balance to the trichiliocosm. These individuals are known as shamans. Our story begins with our protagonist wondering what it was, knowing that it was just an empty plot until yesterday. He wonders if the owners built a house overnight. Suddenly, a lady comes out of the house, surprising him. The lady has a scar and different eye colors, and she looks at him, but she just walks past him, leaving him amazed. He thinks she looks really badass and wonders if she was the landlord. The lady searches for something in her pocket and wonders if she forgot it. Then she calls the man Chickling, making him angry. He asks her if she called him Chickling. She replies yes and explains that he was the blonde Chickling. Then she asks him if he could lend her a lighter. Annoyed, he replies that it is ridiculous. Then he shows his patch while telling the lady to listen to him. He informs her that he is a member of the student council and that asking for a lighter from such a diligent student means she misjudged him. Then he looks around feeling upset and tells the lady to watch herself. Going forward, he hops onto his motorcycle, still annoyed that the lady assumed he was a gangster or something. When he is about to leave, the lady calls him Chickling again and tells him that there must be a lot of people angry with him nearby, so it would be best for him to be careful from now on. He replies whatever and calls the lady a hack. Then he leaves while shouting at the lady not to toss her cigarette butts everywhere. She searches her pockets, calling the man a jerk. She shows a talisman while saying that since she found it, it'll be fine. Then she activates it while saying come forth Dukshini, and Dukshini appears. She orders Dukshini to activate fire to light her cigarettes. She exhales the smoke and asks if that kid is the one who will become a god or the host. The student tells him that he heard from his father that the lady is a famous shaman and that she moved there recently. She also runs a YouTube channel and her username is Fancy. He checks the name on YouTube and is amazed that the lady's channel actually pops up. Then he clicks on one video and hears the lady greet her viewers and introduce herself as everybody's Destiny Fancy. He laughs, wondering if the lady's name is really Fancy and not a suit on him. The student tells him that he heard that Fancy is good at reading fortunes and that she is famous for her fortune-telling videos because she is always on point. He also heard that Fancy often targets celebrities, and recently she targeted a member of the National Assembly. It appears that Fancy is just giving a fortune in the video, but the very next day something happens to the person she predicted and they get arrested. It doesn't just happen once or twice. Fancy's predictions are correct every time. He happily thanks Kyungsun for the information from the National Assembly member's son, and he thanks him because his curiosity is now solved. Chong Seon asks if it means he can put his hands down, but he replies no, he can't. Kyung-sin is surprised and asks why he can't. Suddenly, a lot of people come their way. Then they look at Kim Sung-in furiously, but he just smiles and says that the bugs get tangled up. The men ask him if he touched Kyung-seok again and tell him that they should put an end to it. He stands up and tells them that he can't believe they are all there together, while Kyung-seok cheers for the men to kick Tae-Sung, but Tae-Sung shouts that it is time to end it. Then he throws the cell phone toward the men while Fancy's video is telling them that it was a fortune of theirs in today's horoscope. The phone hits one of the men's chin, making the others surprised and asking what he meant. Tae-Sung prepares his fist, repeating their questions, and punches the men one by one in the chin while telling them that all those who came there are doomed. Kyung-seok can't believe that he knocks all of the men down in an instant and wonders if he is really human. He grabs his phone back and is shocked to see his phone screen is broken. Then he kneels and angrily asks the man what he did to his phone, but the man reminds him that he threw it. The other man walks angrily to attack him. From behind, while he is busy telling the man to pay for his phone, the man attacks him confident that it is good because Tae-Sung doesn't know it is coming, but Tae-Sung feels something from behind him and just waves his head to the side to avoid it. The man is surprised because he knows that Tae-Sung shouldn't have seen it coming and wonders how he avoided it, but Tae-Sung punches him, telling him to just shut it. Without getting the answer, he stands up and is glad that he is finally done with it. While behind him the men collapse on the ground and Kinsiak is surprised. He tells the others to come out, which the nerds do. While laughing awkwardly, he shows a plastic bag with things and tells the nerds to grab their phones or money or whatever those idiots took from them. He assures them that they won't stand anymore, so they should be relieved. The nerds thank him, but he pulls the plastic bag backward a little and tells them that he needs funds for such activities and he'll be taking a 10 commission. The nerds angrily call him a cheapskate, but still tell him that they'll give him a note and they'll send it via PayPal. He walks away while thanking the nerds and tells them that he won't forget their support until the day the bully disappears. They and he will be together, but the nerds wish him to disappear too. Then he looks at his phone, remembering that Fancy is a shaman, but he hopes that they don't get involved in anything in the future. Then he remembers someone telling him not to cry. He scratches his head thinking that he shouldn't have thought about it, but now his memory is going to suffer. He walks angrily while shouting "screw it," and decides to do a few spins for his collections. While someone is looking at him from a distance, the man asks his comrade if she thinks it was Tae-Sung Mayor looking for. She replies yes, and it is for certain because that guy is a phantasmagoria, an entity that responds to attacks from an invisible perspective, and it responded to the signal sent by memories. The man tells the lady that she is so sure and asks her what if Tae-Sung is not the one, but she just replies that it doesn't matter whether he is the one or not because that woman has already made a move. Then he summons Yagwi, which means an evil spirit. She orders it to go. It runs towards Tae-Sung, while the lady tells her companion that the day of prophecy is just around the corner and they have to stop it no matter what, even if they have to kill Tae-Sung. Meanwhile, the delivery man is driving on the highway when he spots a motorcycle on the side of the road. He is amazed to see the motorcycle model Cop 921, and looking at it in person is nice. The man doesn't know who the owner is and he thinks the owner must have spent a lot of money on it, but he wonders why it is in front of a high school. He walks closer and sees an image of Tae-Sung sticking on the helmet, saying that if he touches it, he'll die, which shocks him. He shouts if it really belongs to a student because he can't believe it without realizing that an evil presence is behind him. The man grabs his helmet in disbelief that a high schooler punk drives it with no fear, and he doesn't know that motorcycles are scary and just look cool on the outside. Without noticing the evil spirit launching at him, it enters the man, and the man bends in shock, wondering what it was. Then he shouts while changing into the form of the evil spirit. The bird near the man sees everything, and in the bird's eye what it sees is what the lady sees. Fancy opens her eyes and realizes that it has begun. She stands up and looks back to tell tomorrow that she'll be back. Meanwhile, inside the school, Tae-Sung was happy that he had made a lot of money today. While the students were looking at him angrily, he was looking at his balance, realizing that after subtracting his month's rent and living expenses and adding the money from his 2 other part-time jobs, there would be enough for him. He was happy that it was finally coming together. Around this time last year, he had coincidentally come across a Cop 921 on his birthday, and he fell in love with it at first sight. In his one and only lifetime, he wanted to be with it so badly despite being poor, so he started saving up cash using an installment plan and being flexible with his finances. Finally today, the fruition of his hard work had come to reality. He was in tears, knowing that 1 year had been a long journey, but the Cop 921 was finally becoming one with him. Unfortunately, his beloved Cop 921 was destroyed into pieces, and he was heartbroken to see it. He furiously grabbed the man and asked who had done it to his motorcycle, the man replied that another man suddenly started destroying it while pointing to the person behind him, but the man just looked at him in silence. He furiously asked him if he was crazy and why he wasn't taking off his helmet. The man just jumped away, making him angry, and he asked the man why he was running. The man ran away like an animal, making the people wonder who he was. Tae-Sung furiously chased the man and told him to stop, but the man continued to run abnormally. He chased the man, wondering how dare he messed with his prized possession. What grudge did he have to do something like that to his motorcycle, and why was the man running like that? He felt like he was caught up with a real lunatic. The man ran to the corner, shouting that it didn't matter what type of person he was. Then he stopped on the corner and shouted back, asking the man why he had messed with his 1 year of hard work. He threw his bag hard at the man, furiously telling him that he had really crossed the line. His bag hit the man's helmet and it rolled to the ground. He walked closer to the man, telling him to come at him and let him beat him up. He was shaking with anger and tears as he approached the man, determined to teach him a lesson. He told the man that he was not sure who he was and asked him to reveal his identity. The man looked at him with a cat-like face and a cat-like voice. Tae-Sung slowly walked backward in shock, but the man attacked him. He looked at his wounds and fell backward in shock. He touched his body and realized that he didn't have any wounds, even though he felt like he had been cut by something. Suddenly, he felt something inside him grabbed his heart and felt a chilling sensation he had never experienced before. His instincts were telling him that the guy in front of him was dangerous. The man looked at him while meowing, then ran toward him to attack it. Tried to hit him, but he positioned himself to avoid it. He knew that the man's movements were big, and at that rate he could slightly dodge and try to counterattack, but suddenly he felt something, so instead of counterattacking, he got down on the ground to avoid it. The man's attack broke the wall, surprising him. He wondered what the man was because he could break the wall like that. He also knew that if he hadn't instinctively dodged, he would have been severely injured. Suddenly, someone called him Little Duckling and told him that he was still alive. He looked up and saw Fancy
sitting on a huge monster, expressing her worry about what she would do if he died. She was amazed that he was lasting a lot
longer than she expected. He realized that she was the shaman from that morning and asked her how a person could float in the air, confusing Fancy. She told the monster named Steel to head in because Tae-Sung couldn't see ghosts, which meant he couldn't see the evil spirit possessing the man's body. He asked her what ghost she was talking about and told her to explain so he could understand, but she simply told him to look at his enemy who was jumping toward him. He managed to avoid it while Fancy explained to him that he was currently fighting a vessel possessed by a ghost. The vessel borrowed the power of the ghost, giving it abilities that a normal human wouldn't have. The ghost attacked him and he furiously fought back, but the ghost just jumped high to avoid his attacks and left. Fancy told him that as an ordinary human he was no match for the ghost. He told her that she had explained enough and asked her why she was there if she wasn't going to help. She laughed and replied that it was usually more fun to watch people fight each other. He agreed and told her that he couldn't deny it. She looked at him, realizing that an ordinary human would have died by now, but the owner of the phantasmagoria was really different. She knew that Tae-Sung could sense the danger of a ghost without even seeing it, and he was even instinctively dodging the attacks. He couldn't see, however, the ghost went under him, and he was shocked to see it in his blind spot. He knew he couldn't dodge, so he got hit by its attack. Fancy knew that his human body had its limits. He realized that he had been cut, and the events of today had been really weird. He thought that bad luck had followed him since he met the shaman. He just wanted to live the way he wanted to, so he wondered if he was being punished. He apologized to his broken Cop 921 as its useless owner wouldn't be able to avenge it. He was ready to accept his death, but his Cop 921 told him not to die and reminded him that it would avenge its 500 men one body. He stood firmly, surprising Fancy in the evil spirit he shouted that he had worked hard for his dreams too, so he wasn't going to die without knowing why. Hearing this, Fancy laughed and told him that he was tough. She suggested that they should start moving. She released a lot of talismans, while telling Tae-Sung that it would be a mess if he died, so the spirit in front of him would help a bit. Then she threw the talismans toward him, ordering the spirit of the netherworld to breathe life into his dying body. She cast the possession of Dueoksini. Dueoksini slowly entered his body, and he felt a pain in his chest. He felt a strong heat inside of him, and then he slowly transformed into the Dueoksini form, shouting in agony. A minute later, Fancy looked at him with a smile as the smoke gradually cleared, revealing his fiery hair and his Dueoksini form. Fancy gazed at him, stating that among all spirits Dueoksini was superior, and wondered if Tae-Sung would ever be able to harness those powers. The evil cat stared at Tae-Sung in confusion as it caught Dueoksini's fierce glare, causing it to leap backwards in shock. Immediately, it summoned its power, assaulting Tae-Sung with its cat abilities and razor-sharp claws. The claws pierced him, shattering his student council badge. The cat grinned with satisfaction, but its smugness was interrupted by a loud crack. Looking down, it noticed its arm was bent. Suddenly, Tae-Sung called to the cat from behind, surprising it as it turned. Tae-Sung landed a punch to its face, sending it flying. He healed his wounds and proclaimed it was his time to lead. Fancy laughed proudly, observing him, and declared that this was the power of Dueoksini. She informed him that he had a unique talent of vision that could perceive the cat possessing the man. She explained that with the power of Dueoksini, he could easily exercise the cat. Unexpectedly, he swung to punch her, but she skillfully dodged his attack in time. He declared that the shaman was also a target. She realized it was too much for Tae-Sung to accept Dueoksini all at once. His failure to be fully possessed by the spirit resulted in him falling into a trance until he could awaken. Unconsciously, complete possession was a challenge. He instructed her to stay still while Fancy effortlessly avoided his attacks. The cat, now under control, grasped that Tae-Sung's possession was incomplete, so the woman commanded it to cease prolonging the situation and decided to end it. The arm healed, and it struck the ground using its unique skills. Tae-Sung attempted to evade, but a barrage of fur ensnared him. Fancy noted his predicament, musing if the phantasmagoria wasn't starting because he was still in a trance. As she said this, the ground behind her began to crack. Something emerged from the fissure, assaulting her from behind. Swiftly, she unfurled her fan, deflecting the fur attack while taunting it for presuming she couldn't dodge a sloppy assault. She scorned, labeled in an arrogant cat, and demanded how it dared to strike her. The cat's owner conceded that her strategy hadn't worked, but she remained unperturbed, confident that capturing the spirit was a victory. She instructed the cat to launch another attack, unleashing its cat skill, needing the cat attacked, but Tae-Sung simply ordered the cat to release him. In frustration, the owner concluded it was difficult due to the spirit's interference and commanded her cat to utilize its drill skill. Fancy stared in shock, querying Tae-Sung about the consequences of a direct hit. She looked at Tae-Sung, shouting about fur in his nose, and fearing he showed no signs of waking, worrying he lacked motivation. She prepared a talisman, lacking the time to figure out another way to rouse him. Suddenly, Tae-Sung mentioned 5 million, leaving her both surprised and bewildered. In fury, he accused the cat of stealing his money and reminded her of everything he'd sacrificed for his target. The cat's owner derided Tae-Sung as prophecy boy and ordered him to die. The cat lunged at him, brandishing its drill. Before it could strike, Fancy offered Tae-Sung 10 million won if he could catch the cat app. At the mention of such an amount, he woke in shock. He seized the sharp edge of the fur drill, trying to escape the fur trap. A moment later, he vanished. The cat, now disoriented, found itself violently slammed to the ground, with Tae-Sung sternly telling it to stop causing trouble with fur. The impact shattered the cat's fangs, and Tae-Sung merely smirked at its predicament. Fancy realized that Tae-Sung was straightforward, yet she found his actions impressive. He was the vessel destined to become a god. The cat face has the imprint of his punch, and he laughed heartily, informing the arrogant cat of his victory. However, he couldn't help but wonder why his hair was on fire. Despite this, he seemed content. Fancy was astounded that Tae-Sung had overcome the most challenging part and believed nothing could hinder her plans. Suddenly, he referred to Fancy as Nuna, a term meaning sister. Taking her by surprise, he assured her that he had captured the cat, so he intended to claim the 10 million won prize. She complimented his impressive actions, noting that the circumstances must be bizarre for him, yet he remained money-focused, indifferent to her observation stations. He proudly confessed that he was a money-driven fool. His joy halted abruptly when Fancy revealed she couldn't fulfill her promise. Furious, he demanded to know why she was altering their agreement. He even questioned if she regretted wagering 10 million won. Offering a compromise, he proposed to reduce his price. However, she reassured him that she was a woman of her word, intending to honor her promise as long as the malevolent spirit cat remained captive. Frustrated, Fancy seized the cat, reminding Tae-Sung that his payment hinged on the completion of his task. She pointed out that he was supposed to secure the cat, not a possessed person. In a fit of rage, he grabbed her cape, accusing her of insanity. He hotly disputed any agreement to the contrary, her irritation matching his. Fancy retorted, asking him who he thought he was yelling at and whether he believed his tantrum would change the situation. Placing her hand on Sung's forehead, she ordered him to sleep. As a result, the spirit named Dukshini left his body, and he collapsed, landing heavily on the ground. She contemptuously called him weak. Fancy then apprehended the ghost cat that had tried to escape but ended up torn to shreds. All the while, she lamented that overconfident shamans were losing their minds. The cat's owner coughed up blood. In agony, asked by her companion if she was all right, the woman bitterly vowed revenge on Fancy, blaming her for her cat's demise. An entity materialized and questioned if she would remain defiant. An elder advised them that their true identities had been discovered. Anticipating a vigorous defense of the phantasmagoria, the elder suggested they make haste and prepare themselves. They agreed respectfully. The elder declared that after 8 years it was time for them to engage in a deadly confrontation. In Sung's childhood, he was frequently bullied, labeled as homeless and malodorous. The adults gossiped about his mother, a single parent, a shaman who didn't know the identity of his father. He returned home in tears one day, seeking comfort from his mother. Tenderly, she asked why her little golden toad was upset. Her surprise was evident when he asked her to explain what single mother meant. His mother urged him to pay attention, elucidating that single mothers were remarkable individuals who did everything independent. This revelation left Sung and all. His mother comforted him, telling him not to cry too long, promised not to shed tears. Apologizing for his previous falsehoods, he knew his mother always put on a brave face for him, even when things weren't all right. His mother playfully suggested that if he sold talismans, he'd become wealthy. Tae-Sung excitedly suggested they could afford an apartment. His mother humorously retorted that their wealth wouldn't extend that far. He knew his mother was struggling because of him. The landlord's admonishment about their overdue rent reached his ears, and he witnessed his mother pleading for more time. However, she always maintained a cheerful disposition. Sung rationalized that poverty was bearable, lies were forgivable, and he didn't care if his mother was a shaman. He implored her to stay with him always. One day, he returned home eager to see his mother, but she was absent. He found a note in which she explained her departure, stating that she'd raised him to be self-sufficient and now sought to live freely. She wrote that if they were destined to meet again, they would. Young Tae-Sung was bewildered and wondered aloud about the hardships his mother must have endured in the cost of raising him. He concluded it must have been substantial. He speculated whether his mother felt she couldn't enjoy her life with him and decided to leave him behind to pursue a better existence. Defiantly, he vowed to surpass his mother's achievements, promising her a better life filled with money and other luxuries. He woke up in tears, realizing it was a dream. Fancy called out to him, chuckling, asking if he was awake and why he was crying. He responded With anger when he asked where he was, she informed him that he was at her place. He looked around, suspecting it was a shaman's house. A familiar sense stirred memories, reminding him of his childhood home filled with similar items. Suddenly, he noticed a figure adorned with talismans at the center of the room. Panicked, he questioned Fancy about the figure. Wondering if it was a corpse, she corrected him, saying that the man Damaru was alive, but without a soul, hence his corpse-like appearance. She also revealed that Dimru was her boyfriend, leaving Tae-Sung in shock. He demanded to know who she truly was. Fancy melodramatically asked if he genuinely didn't recognize her. He knew her only as a shaman YouTuber. She directed his attention to a point behind him, introducing herself as the reincarnation of Margaret, the greatest shaman. She claimed to have been sent to fulfill a prophecy. According to this prophecy, a god would be born on the 18th birthday of a boy with a lantern, and the star prediction is Tae-Sung was the owner of the phantasmagoria. He asked what it was, and she told him that she would explain. She asked if he had ever heard of memories. She suggested that they think about the moment when someone gets hit by a bus. If that person gets hit, he'll die instantly, but in that moment of facing death, many thoughts will pass through his head in an instant. Both thoughts are his memories signals triggered when he's facing death. This phenomenon is known as the passing of memories. The lantern is actually prepared for facing death. It sends a danger signal to its owner, helping them avoid danger in advance. One of the divine creations that existed before mankind is the phantasmagoria, and that's what he had in his mind. She told him that she was certain he had also experienced it many times. When he is in danger, he suddenly gets chills, goosebumps, and gains the ability to evade danger. She explained that all of these are flashes of hope designed to save him. He exclaimed that he couldn't believe something like this recited within him, but she reassured him that he was the hero of the prophecy and he was destined to become a god. Panicked, he asked her to confirm if he was really going to become a god. She confidently replied yes, adding that a god is the king of all ghosts and the one who can pacify all beings. He shouted in disbelief that he was going to be a god, but Fancy shouted back, urging him to accept his fate. Suddenly, he asks what, leaving Fancy confused. He cornered her, declaring that he didn't care whether he was a god or not. Then he demanded that she give him his 10 million won. The Fancy playfully asked him why he was hitting the wall, teasing if he was trying to win her over. She claimed she felt as though she were in trouble, like she was in front of her boyfriend. He retorted, asking if it appeared as though he were confessing, told her to stop speaking nonsense, and demanded his money back so he could pay an invoice. Fancy accused him of being overly obsessed with money. She teased him with some cash, asking if he wanted it, causing him to become excited. But then she unexpectedly punched him in the stomach, reminding him that he was daydreaming again. He crumbled to the ground, clutching his stomach in pain. Meanwhile, Fancy explained that phantasmagoria has a powerful ability as it's a vessel, but his phantasmagoria was too weak. She further explained that phantasmagoria imbues its owner's soul with an intense attachment to life. In his case, she suspected money was his obsession. Conversely, when he had money and felt secure, his judgment lapsed, just like now when he failed to dodge her punch. Fancy angrily told him there were people who despised his existence, like the cat they'd seen earlier, who were desperate to kill him. She criticized his laid-back attitude, considering his weakness, noting she was somewhat aware of his status as a deity. He replied that he didn't know whether he was a god or a ghost, and that he felt intrigued when he heard such things despite their lack of realism. He then asked if she knew his reality and told her that he was the owner of a wrecked motorcycle. He sadly mentioned that his birthday was the following day, which was supposed to be the day he officially owned his motorcycle. He confessed us that since the previous year he had been watching her, but she wasn't there anymore. If this was what love was like, he had no intention of experiencing it again. She replied that if he claimed he wasn't interested, there was nothing she could do. He noticed the sweet, extraordinary scent he'd never encountered before. Fancy told him that It was unfortunate had their conversation gone well, she would have given him a present. She then opened a case filled with money and asked him what she should do. His eyes widened at the sight of the money, envisioning bundles of 5,000,000 notes. He quickly calculated it all, realizing it totaled 100 million. He wondered if Fancy had prepared this because she felt guilty about their earlier money play, and if it was real. She asked him if he was interested. He replied while drooling and nosebleeding that it was a bit too much. She teased him, asking if he wanted to hear what she had to say. He asked back if he should listen. All of a sudden Fancy closed the case, shocking him. She told him to just wait for one day. She explained that tomorrow was his birthday or prophecy day. If he could safely get through it, she would give him all the money as a birthday present, but he doubted her, asking if he was expected to believe that he would receive 100 million won after enduring one day, suspecting it to be another trick. Fancy reassured him, asking if he'd listen to her. He excitedly replied in the affirmative. As he was an obedient child, he mentioned he was already looking forward to tomorrow, his eyes fixed on the money case. Fancy knew it had been 8 years, and she had to succeed this time. She promised that she would turn him into a god, and she would use the god's power for her revenge on the shamans. She took off her sunglasses and told him their contract was signed. She then put the sunglasses on him as a present, which left him utterly confused. The following day at school, students and teachers were surprised by his new look. The teacher attempted to make him remove his sunglasses, but he walked away. His teacher asked him about the sunglasses, to which he replied that he'd had LASIK surgery. The teacher reminded him his eyesight was perfect, but he retorted that he wanted to have the vision of a hawk. The teacher, getting frustrated, accused him of playing games with his words, but he just stared past the teacher and saw a ghost. He punched the ghost, telling it he could see it well, which surprised his teacher. He noticed that after wearing the sunglasses, he could see ghosts very well. After observing a large entity, he nervously asked Fancy what it was and why he could see it. She replied that it wasn't his first time, and it was a spirit that had possessed him. He calmed down a bit, asking if it was the same entity that had possessed him when his head was on fire. He also noted that the entity was rather ugly. Fancy explained that it was a tool for viewing spirits, which allowed not only sight but also communication and contact. She added that enemies would try to attack him by sending humans possessed by ghosts, as they had done before. Attacks made by a possessed person are quite threatening, so he had to survive by identifying enemies with the sunglasses she'd given him. The prophecy date was the 1st of March in the lunar calendar at high noon. The next day he realized that while the day of prophecy didn't seem special, one thing was certain: someone was coming to kill him. He glanced at his classmates, wondering if one of them would be possessed by a ghost. He checked his phone, knowing the event would occur in the next 3 hours, but he wasn't concerned. He wouldn't be a part-timer anymore, and if he endured long enough, he'd get 100 million won. He confidently invited his enemy to come, promising to keep his patience until then. Suddenly, he saw someone outside the window. A clown man holding something in his back orders him to be untied. He complied and untied it, revealing an elder, which surprised and confused him and the students. The teacher asked the men who they were, stating that outsiders could not access the area without permission. The men just stared silently. The teacher told them to leave if they didn't have permission. As he did, the elder crept up to him, amid the teacher, and slowly devoured him. In the blink of an eye, the teacher was gone. The elder thanked them for the food, then shifted into a new persona, introducing itself as a general, ordering everyone to obey. This left him stunned. He wondered if they were shamans and why they were so brazen. Suddenly, he felt something biting him, ordering him to follow the general's command. He broke it in half, shocked to see his classmates' faces morph into the elder's face, drooling as they stared at him. Then they all shouted that they'd accept the general's orders. While staring at him, he awkwardly smiled because he finally understood what was happening. He remembered Fancy giving him a talisman. He accepted it while questioning what it was and if it signified he was to undertake a college entrance exam or something similar. She explained that it was a seal that contained spirits and that she had placed Dueoksini within it. Consequently, if he used it, he would become possessed by Dueoksini and transform, but he would need to ensure he only used it when dealing with those he had last time. He shook his head, informing Fancy he had no desire to do so, and that he found it hard to believe Dueoksini would enter his body, earning him a glare from Dueoksini. He then asked Fancy if she could just protect him. She responded that she would love to, but had to keep an eye on Demru. She further explained that Dimru was a heavenly body any spirit could capture, and that prior to him Dimru had been the body of a man who had almost ascended to godhood. Furthermore, shamans were not only targeting him, but also Dimru. It was challenging to fight them and protect both him and Dimru at the same time, therefore they should proceed with a feint operation. He agreed that this was a good plan. He stretched out his hand, asking Fancy for confirmation that his sole task was to stay alive the following day, believing it to be an easy task. Fancy, gleeful, confirmed his understanding, complimenting his intelligence. However, he cautioned her to remember one thing puzzling her. He pointed at her, declaring that he hated liars more than anything else in the world, and that if he discovered any deceit, he would do his utmost to sabotage her plan. She turned around, asking if he still bore a grudge and requesting a moment of his time. Subsequently, she handed him 10 million won, stating it was his advance payment. Much to his surprise, excited, he accepted the money, reminding himself of the feel of a substantial amount of cash. Fancy warned him not to be too greedy, as she didn't want her plan ruined due to his greed. He assured her that he was not concerned, and that he would consider it his down payment, as he was stronger than anyone else. Unfortunately, he was currently fleeing, crying out for assistance because he was overwhelmed. He could not believe all of his classmates were possessed, but suppose their number was adequate for a good fight. He halted his students from another room, emerged, repeating that they were following the orders of the general. He produced the talisman, wondering if the entire school had fallen under possession. As the students closed in on him, he had no choice but to place the talisman on his chest. Gradually changing into his Dueoksini form, the students surrounded him, attempting to seize him. However, having fully transformed into Dueoksini, he retaliated by punching the nearest student, warning them all of them will be the sacrifices for his 10 million. As the students lunged to capture him, he sprang to meet them in the center, kneeing anyone in his path. He then grabbed the heads of 2 students, slamming them together while instructively commanding them to kiss each other. He landed, and the students tried to apprehend him again. However, he vanished and used his spiritual ability to grasp the entities that had possessed the students. Then he bit them in half, laughing as he beckoned the students to come to him. His 10 million won. A clown man informed his elder that Tae-Sung was fighting. Impressively, the elder responded that of course he was given, that Soon was channeling to exceed his spirit, but it wasn't into full possession, merely a partial one. The student seized his feet, his waist, and his face, as the elder told the clown man that the memories in Soong's state were unstable, rendering him less functional. Amidst this, Tae-Sung wondered if he was that popular. He flung the students away, shouting at them not to touch him. He knew that even though they were weaker than the cat he had previously encountered, their number was vast, and he had a problem recognizing that it was going to be challenging to maintain this. Until midnight, his gadget rang. He put his Flex AirPods, paid for with his money, into his ears and answered the call. Fancy explained she had called because she was concerned, then inquired if he was doing well, since she presumed there wasn't an issue given that he was still alive. Angrily, he asked her what she meant by no problem, and informed her that it was not just one person, but hundreds that were possessed. He then questioned why Jackson was using all the students. She asked if he was referring to Jangsum, the great general, by any chance. When he confirmed, she explained that Jangsun was incredibly annoying and had 3 faces each with different abilities. Therefore, to free the students from his control, he would have to break its face. She then informed him that they had sent him a gift and that he should enjoy the fight on his way. She then hung up, causing him to panic and attempt to stop Fancy. He turned around wondering why he had been talking and why he had been cut off mid-sentence. While he was about to punch the ground shattered, propelling the nearby students away. He then jumped out through the ceiling, gradually descending from the building. He landed in front of Jang-sun and the clown man, who were both taken aback. He looked up at Jang-sun, shouting that he needed to swiftly destroy those three faces. He lunged at Jang-sun, ready to attack, but noticed something attacking him from the side. He turned back and saw the clown man protecting Jang-sun.